The iron gates of Althorp don't just open, they whisper. Beyond them lies a $100 million sanctuary wrapped in ivy and silence. It's not just a mansion. It's where Diana rests, and where her brother, Charles Spencer, still walks alone. But what secrets echo through these marble halls? Today, we step inside the estate, the fortune, and the life of the Earl, who never escaped the shadow of his sister, but built something extraordinary in it. May 20th, 1964. In the gilded corridors of London aristocracy, a baby boy entered the world, Charles Edward Maurice Spencer. His godmother, Queen Elizabeth II. His cradle, Althorp, the 90-room ancestral estate that had belonged to the Spencer family for over 5 centuries. To the world, this was privilege, a fairy tale beginning. But inside the nursery walls, the cracks had already begun to show. When Charles was just 3, his world shifted. His parents' marriage, strained by distance and desire, collapsed under scandal. His mother, Frances, fell in love with another man, Peter Shand Kidd. The divorce made headlines, but for Charles and his sister Diana, it left something deeper. Silence, emotional abandonment, confusion, and soon, exile. At the age of 8, Charles was sent away to boarding school, Maidwell Hall in Northamptonshire. To outsiders, it was elite, exclusive, a path to Eton, Oxford, and titles. But for young Charles, it was a haunted house. Years later, in his searing 2024 memoir, A Very Private School, Spencer would rip away the curtain. He described it not as a school, but a prison cloaked in tradition. He wrote of being beaten, shamed, cast out and left to bleed. His words struck a national nerve. My soul was stitched with threads of silence and pain. Some wounds don't show, others never close. But Charles didn't break. He retreated into books, into history, into stories. He survived Maidwell, made it to Eton, and then to Oxford's Magdalen College, where he studied modern history, clinging to the belief that if he could understand the past, he might just learn how to live with his own. After graduating, he didn't head straight into titles or luxury. Instead, he chose journalism. First as a correspondent for NBC News in the US, later as a writer for The Guardian, The Telegraph, and Vanity Fair. He had a voice, refined, restrained, but razor-sharp. It was his way of reclaiming power, one word at a time. But fate had more in store. In 1992, when Charles was just 27, his father died. Suddenly, he was no longer just a writer. He was the 9th Earl Spencer, the new custodian of Althorp. A 500-year legacy now rested on his shoulders, and in 5 short years the title would become a burden few could carry. The year the world stopped, the year Diana, the people's princess, died. As the globe mourned, Charles stood inside Westminster Abbey. He didn't speak like a peer. He spoke like a brother. His eulogy wasn't polished. It was raw. A quiet fury pulsed beneath every word as he condemned the paparazzi, the palace, and the pressures that chased his sister into an early grave. She needed no royal title to continue to generate her particular brand of magic. In that moment, millions saw not the Earl, not the aristocrat, but the protector. But after the funeral, he returned to Althorp. Alone. The estate became his refuge and his responsibility. But how does a man raised in shadows rebuild something grand, something sacred? How does he breathe life back into a house that had become a mausoleum? To understand that, we must follow him through the gates of Althorp, to the home that shaped him, and the home he now shapes. Estate in Althorp. The gates of Althorp don't creak. They sigh. They open with the weight of centuries, revealing a long gravel driveway lined with chestnut trees and whispering willows. You don't arrive at Althorp. You are received. At first glance, it seems like a painting. A pale stone mansion with tall sash windows and ivy crawling across corners like time itself. The kind of place that doesn't just sit on land, it listens to it. Welcome to Althorp, the $100 million heart of the Spencer family. A house that has stood for over 500 years. A house that has outlived kings, survived wars, and now holds the memory of a princess. But step closer. Let's go beyond the facade. As your feet crunch across the gravel and the main doors swing open, the air changes. It isn't colder, it's older, wiser. Inside, the entrance hall greets you not with extravagance, but with elegance. Polished marble floors shimmer under shafts of light. Sculpted busts of long-dead ancestors line the walls, their eyes cast toward eternity. And somewhere in that silence, you can almost hear the laughter of two children, Diana and Charles, running through these very halls. To the left, the drawing room unfolds in soft blues and antique golds. Tall French windows overlook the south lawn, letting in a gentle afternoon sun. An ornate fireplace guards the room like an old friend. Above it, portraits of Spencer's past peer down. Brushstrokes frozen in time, yet strangely familiar. Across the corridor, the state dining room stretches like a theater of memory. A mahogany table runs endlessly beneath crystal chandeliers that glisten like icicles. The walls, once witness to statesmen, royals, and authors, now echo only the clink of porcelain and the murmur of stories long told. But it's the library that feels most alive. This is Charles Spencer's sanctuary. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves house first editions, ancient manuscripts, and personal journals. There's a particular scent here: leather, ink, and something harder to name: legacy. In a corner, a leather armchair sits beneath a brass reading lamp, the place where Charles writes history while living inside it. And then, the windows. They frame the outside world like art. Beyond them, English gardens bloom in practiced perfection. Roses tumbling over stone walls, lavender hedges lining winding paths, fountains murmuring beneath sculpted yews. But the eye is drawn to something else, a shimmering oval lake in the distance, and at its center, an island, silent, sacred. This is where Diana lies. No gravestone, no name, just trees, wildflowers, and weeping willows bending like mourners. Charles chose this resting place not for grandeur, but for grace. She belonged to the world, yes, but she belonged here first. He visits often, not with security, not with ceremony, but alone. Sometimes in the early morning mist, sometimes at twilight. No cameras, no speeches, just a brother and memory. But Althorp is not a museum. It lives, it breathes, it evolves. Since inheriting the estate in 1992, Charles has quietly orchestrated a massive restoration, from re-roofing ancient wings to launching Althorp Living History, a luxury furniture line inspired by the estate's timeless designs. His mission? To preserve the soul without trapping it in the past. Each summer, the doors of Althorp open to thousands of visitors. They come to see the rooms, the gardens, the artifacts. But most of all, they come for her, Diana. And Charles ensures that every footstep through those halls supports a cause. Proceeds from public visits are directed to charity, transforming curiosity into compassion. Weddings, literary festivals, charity galas. Althorp hosts them all, but never at the expense of its intimacy. Despite its size, the mansion never overwhelms. It invites. It remembers. And as the sun dips behind the treetops, the estate glows gold for a moment. Not flashy, but eternal. In that quiet, something lingers. Not just history, not just royalty, but the ache and resilience of a family, and a man who refused to let the past decay. So what does it take to keep a place like this alive? To carry not just stone and wood, but the weight of legacy? To answer that, we must step beyond the gardens and into the world of quiet fortune. At Althorp, wealth doesn't shout. It doesn't flash in gold-plated garages or burst from branded yachts. It lingers in the hush of a library filled with first editions, in the soft creak of a 17th-century staircase still standing firm, in the silent reflection of an island grave surrounded by swans. Yet behind that quiet elegance, one number stands tall. Charles Spencer's estimated net worth, $125 million. But how does an earl in post-monarchy Britain amass and maintain such a fortune? Without fanfare, without scandal, and without selling his soul to modern celebrity? To answer that, we must trace the roots. The Spencer wealth began centuries ago, not in politics or war, but wool. Yes, wool. During the Tudor era, the family rose to prominence through a booming sheep farming business. Combined with strategic marriages and vast land acquisitions, the Spencers became one of Britain's most powerful aristocratic dynasties. They weren't born into riches. They bred, bought, and built them. But Charles Spencer was never content to simply inherit. He transformed. When he became the 9th Earl in 1992, Althorp was in need, structurally, financially, spiritually. Many noble estates crumble under their own weight, too expensive to maintain, too outdated to modernize. But Charles refused to let that happen. His first decision? Open the doors. Not metaphorically, literally. Each summer, he began offering carefully curated tours of Althorp. But this wasn't just heritage tourism. It was emotion. It was memory. Visitors weren't walking through a stately home. They were stepping into Diana's story. And every ticket bought became a thread in a larger tapestry, one of preservation, of purpose, of remembrance. But the genius didn't stop there. Charles launched Althorp Living History, a luxury furniture and home decor line inspired by actual pieces within the estate. Ornate writing desks, damask-covered chairs, regal bed frames, all reimagined for the modern world, yet steeped in the romance of the past. Each piece told a story. Each sale echoed a philosophy. That history, when preserved with care, can become a living, breathing business. And then there's the pen. If Althorp is the spine of Charles's legacy, then writing is its heartbeat. He is a best-selling author, respected, not just for his name, but for his scholarship. His books, The White Ship, Killers of the King, Blake's War, among others, blend historical depth with narrative flair, earning critical acclaim and international readership. But Charles isn't just an author. He's a voice. Through podcasts like The Rabbit Hole Detectives, TV documentaries, and public speaking engagements, he has reshaped his public image, not as Diana's brother, but as a storyteller in his own right. One foot in the past, one eye on the future, and a voice trained to carry both. But perhaps what makes Charles Spencer's fortune most remarkable isn't its scale, it's its purpose. He's not investing in tech unicorns or racing to billionaire status. He's pouring his wealth into roofs, archives, gardens, and galleries, into literature festivals, into charities, into the slow, sacred act of keeping something ancient alive. In a world obsessed with speed and spectacle, Charles Spencer's richness feels still. Still like Althorp at dusk. Still like the lake where his sister rests. Still like a man who has learned that the quietest power is often the most enduring. But what does a man like that give back to the world? And how does grief become generosity? To answer that, let's follow him through the gates again. This time, not as an earl, but as a brother with a promise. Philanthropy. Not all legacies are carved in stone. Some are written in silence, in promises whispered beside a coffin, in footsteps taken through fields once shared with a sister. For Charles Spencer, philanthropy didn't begin with a donation. It began with a eulogy. Westminster Abbey, 1997. The world stood still. Princess Diana, the people's princess, had died. And at the heart of the grief, one man stepped forward. A brother, a voice trembling with sorrow and fury. He didn't just mourn her, he defended her. I pledge that we, your blood family, will do all we can to continue the imaginative and loving way in which you were steering these two exceptional young men so that their souls are not simply immersed by duty and tradition. It wasn't just a farewell. It was a vow, and it would shape everything he did from that moment on. In 1998, Charles opened the gates of Althorp, not for status, but for remembrance. A museum dedicated to Diana's life was created inside the estate. Her letters, her childhood photos, even her iconic wedding dress. Visitors came not out of curiosity, but reverence. And every ticket, every step through those halls, raised funds for the Diana, Princess of Wales Memorial Fund, supporting causes she held dear, landmine victims, the homeless, children without voices. Though the exhibit eventually closed, its spirit endured. In the years that followed, Charles became a patron of the Diana Award, a charity that honors young people who create change in their communities. He didn't just lend his title, he gave his time, his platform, his voice. And in 2024, to mark the award's 25th anniversary, he helped produce and release a charity single, a soul-stirring cover of Make Your Own Kind of Music, recorded right at Althorp. Every lyric, every note, a quiet echo of Diana's defiance and compassion. The funds supported youth-led movements around the globe, exactly the kind of legacy she would have loved. But Charles's giving doesn't end at memory. It extends to the land beneath his feet. Each year, he organizes Cycle for Cynthia, a charity bike ride across the Althorp grounds, raising money for the Cynthia Spencer Hospice, named after his beloved grandmother. The hospice provides end-of-life care for families in Northamptonshire, offering comfort, dignity, and peace. Charles often rides himself, not as an earl, not as a public figure, just a man on a bike, pedaling alongside strangers, connected not by titles, but by empathy. And then there are the evenings beneath the chandeliers, Althorp's black tie galas, where candlelight flickers over clinking glasses and string quartets. These aren't just elegant distractions. They fund education, youth programs, and conservation work. A different kind of nobility, not inherited, but earned. Charles has said more than once that aristocracy must evolve. That legacy is not a crown, but a calling. In every pound raised, in every voice lifted, in every child empowered, he isn't just honoring Diana. He's continuing her unfinished work, extending her light. And in doing so, he has found a way to make grief generous, to let sorrow build instead of bury, to make giving not an obligation, but an act of healing. But behind every gesture of grace, who is the man himself? What does daily life look like inside this monumental estate? When the visitors leave, when the lights dim, when the ghosts return? Let's walk deeper into Althorp, into the man behind the marble. Personal life. Behind the chandeliers and charity, beyond the eulogies and ancient portraits, lives a man who is still learning how to be whole. Charles Spencer's personal life has always been a patchwork of love, loss, longing, and reinvention. It began with beauty and escape. In 1989, he married Victoria Lockwood, a statuesque model from South Africa, whose elegance graced runways and royal tabloids alike. Their union was dazzling, exotic. 4 children followed: Lady Kitty, Lady Eliza, Lady Amelia, and Louis Spencer, the young Viscount Althorp, heir to the family's title and estate. For a time, they left the shadow of the monarchy behind, living under the sun-soaked skies of Cape Town. But distance doesn't dissolve pain. Rumors of infidelity, emotional cracks, and the crushing weight of public scrutiny began to surface. The year they divorced? 1997. The very same year Charles lost Diana. Grief stacked upon grief. The boy who had once been left behind by his mother was now once again watching everything fall apart. Still, life moved forward. Charles married again, this time to Caroline Freud, a woman outside the aristocratic sphere, but no stranger to upper-class Britain. They had 2 children, Ned and Laura. But the connection faded, and so did the marriage. Another chapter closed. Another layer of silence added. Then, in 2011, a glimmer of calm. Under the canopy of trees at Althorp, Charles wed Karen Gordon, a Canadian philanthropist and founder of Whole Child International, a nonprofit dedicated to vulnerable children across the globe. Their union felt purposeful, a bridge between heritage and healing. Together, they welcomed Lady Charlotte Diana Spencer, named with quiet reverence after the sister who never left his heart. For years, it seemed Charles had found something close to peace. He hosted literary festivals, raised funds for children, strolled Althorp's gardens with his daughter, and poured his soul into writing. But even calm can be temporary. In April 2024, it was quietly confirmed. Charles and Karen had separated. The marriage, like those before, would end in divorce. And then, something unexpected bloomed from the cracks. In hushed media whispers and podcast episodes laced with chemistry, a new name emerged. Dr. Kat Jarman, an archaeologist, a historian. Not a duchess, not a debutante, but someone who spoke Charles's language, of ruins, of time, of forgotten voices. They met working together on the Rabbit Hole Detectives, a podcast as curious as it was candid. On air, their laughter was gentle, their debates playful. But off air, something deeper began to take root. It wasn't passion forged in spectacle. It was understanding born of shared obsessions, with the past, with legacy, with digging beneath the surface. Charles has spoken openly about her presence in his life. He describes her as an anchor, grounded, intellectual, unbothered by titles or tradition. And maybe that's exactly what he needs. Today, Charles Spencer's world is quieter than the tabloids imagine. He writes from his corner of the Althorp Library, often lit by the soft glow of stained glass windows. He walks alone near the island where Diana rests, pausing beneath the willows, letting the wind carry thoughts he no longer needs to say aloud. He is closest now to his son Louis, the future Viscount, a charismatic young man often compared to Harry Styles in looks and aura. Louis is poised, media-savvy, and discreet, the embodiment of a new kind of aristocrat. But not all ties are tight. Lady Kitty and Lady Amelia, both now married, living elegant lives between London, Rome, and Cape Town, reportedly share a more distant relationship with their father. Charles did not attend either of their weddings. No public fallout, no official explanation, just absence. A silence that echoes between generations. Still, there is hope. In his tone, in his work, in the laughter that still fills the podcast studio when Charles and Kat go digging through history, one story at a time. He is not trying to perfect the past anymore. He is simply learning to live with it. And in the stillness of Althorp, he is doing just that. Because personal life, for a man like Charles Spencer, is no longer about titles or appearances. It's about presence. It's about honesty. It's about sitting with the ghosts and knowing, finally, they're no longer in control. Every stone at Althorp tells a story of heritage, of heartbreak, of healing. And at the center of it all stands Charles Spencer. Not just as the brother of a princess, but as a man who turned grief into purpose, silence into storytelling, and solitude into strength. If this quiet journey through nobility, memory, and the soul of an English estate moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because beyond every grand estate lies a heart still learning how to carry its history.